So the president last night laid out a case for military strikes on Syria, but at the same time said he's exploring the Russian diplomatic plan to end the chemical weapons dispute. So which is it? Lou Dobbs, fired up. Such a pleasure to have you join us in studio.
Great to be with you.
For me, listening to the president last night did nothing to help me understand the situation or in my own mind feel what the proper move for the U.S. should be with regard to Syria.
The proper move for Syria did not flow from the president's lips. That speech last night, Lori, was not about the direction of the country. It was not a foreign policy speech per se. It was a speech that should never have been given, in my judgment, whatsoever. The reality is the president contradicted himself twice. He said we are not the policemen of the world. He said it twice. He also then said he wants to be the policeman of the world. He said that we have a national security interest in Syria when we flatly, patently do not. There's no one out there watching us or certainly watching the president last night who is under any illusion about the lack of a direct national interest for the United States of America. What he did not acknowledge is that he and his administration over the course of a year uttered the expression red line in connection to the use of chemical weapons, delivered ultimatums that originated in an off-the-cuff, ad-lib mistake by this president. And he is ready to strike a sovereign nation, irrespective of how despicable their use of chemical weapons may be. That is not our role. He talked about the United Nations. The United Nations, the Russians, all could have been brought to bear through diplomacy and a diplomatic effort that had begun at the same time he first used red line. This is a president who is so far afield from the reality of the global demands on this nation. He thinks somehow we are responsible for righting wrongs that he said we were not last night in his speech at one point, even as he suggests we should be. It was a confused, confounding, contradictory speech, and I think arguably the worst ever delivered in terms of its illogical structure by any American president.
Stepping back, bigger picture, because it's the anniversary of the devastating events of September 11th, 2001, how do you think this president has done managing the Al-Qaeda threat to the world?
Well, it now appears, as we reported just as yesterday, there is considerable testimony to the fact that the president, while he was being briefed last year in the midst of a presidential campaign, was being told that Al-Qaeda is expanding, that it is in resurgence, even as he was telling the American people in his campaign for re-election that we have devastated the leadership of Al-Qaeda and that we have contained Al-Qaeda. Both claims turned out not to be true.
So with regard to what the U.S. does about Syria, what's interesting to me is how Russia stepped in and how Syria seemed to accommodate Russia by turning over the chemical weapons. Why wouldn't the United States just say, hey, that sort of came out of left field, and that's okay. If we can get this thing solved via diplomacy, that is the best course of action. But it seems like there are two planes working here. Yeah, parallel planes as to how
I think you have an excellent point, and I believe this president, had he a sense of grace and graciousness, would have acknowledged last night a number of realities, of which he is the beneficiary and of which I think the United States is the beneficiary. One, his Secretary of State gave an offhand remark in reply to a question about how to stop a military strike against Syria, to which he replied, within a week, Syria turned over its chemical weapons. He went on to say, unfortunately, that would not happen because I'm sure his aides were, sucking air through their teeth at the very thought that a Secretary of State would be honest about it. Secondly, the president, in addition to acknowledging his Secretary of State, could have acknowledged Vladimir Putin for responding positively to that opportunity provided, whether it was a mishap or not, by the Secretary of State.
So now are we, the United States, beholden to Putin? What does the timetable look like now?
This country is not beholden to anyone. And one of the things that's happening is that we have a number of savants and gurus holding forth, whether it be the John McCains of the world or Lindsey Graham's or the Tom Friedmans and the savants and gurus who want, for whatever reason, E.J. Dionne wanting to go to war. I don't understand where they're coming from, but I will tell you where we are. We are, as a nation, at a point in our history where we have to exercise this immense power, political
but our
power,
credibility is shaken
power.
here.
Our credibility is not shaken. Credibility of the president is devastated. He's got a 40% approval rating. The United States, it is not an issue of our credibility. It is an issue of the policies that we extend to the world and our response to the unforeseen. The reality is we should be guided by our own principles, by our values, and not by the values that have insisted that this country, or at least the leaders over that time, has been at war since 1990. We've either been in war in the Middle East or we have been pursuing no-fly zones. It's been exhausting to our military, our Air Force, and to our troops.
Words of wisdom, and I will not be unpatriotic. Thank you so much.
Well, I know you would never.
No, thanks, Lou. I appreciate it. Of course, make sure you tune in each and every weeknight, 7 and 10 p.m. Eastern, for Lou Dobbs Tonight right here on the Fox Business Network. Tonight, you can catch a special extended interview with House Judiciary Chairman Bob Goodlatte, who will be discussing the year since the Benghazi attack, as well as the future of immigration.